Hey guys, it's Tiffany with HopeJoyInChrist. So today I want to share with you some things about marriage and just kind of my heart behind what kind of started Hope Joy in Christ and what I would like to offer you today. This will be a little longer than usual. I have such a hard time saying things short. Um, when this all kind of started a few years ago, it was in response to a calling God placed in my life. So, God and I have been walking together for quite some time, but when marriage came, marriage was hard. It was harder than I expected. Um, and you could qualify our first 5 to 7, almost 10 years of marriage as difficult marriage. And there were times we thought divorce was going to be where it led because it was too hard for us. And we got to sort of a breaking point in marriage where I could not see any way to fix it. I had tried all the things. Do you know what I mean? I had read all the books. We had been in counseling. We had talked to pastors. We had tried all of the gimmicks and the tricks and been to retreats, and nothing seemed to bring real lasting change. There was a particular night nearing Christmas, probably 7, 8 years ago, where I had been at choir practice. I remember talking to my sweet friend Karen and saying, when I go home, I'm kicking him out. We're done. I can't do this anymore. It's too much. And I remember I couldn't even sing. The choir practice was just like the longest practice ever for me. It probably wasn't. No offense, our precious choir leader at the time, but I kept hearing this, you haven't done it my way. This is the voice. And I'm like, I have tried to fix this thing every way I know how, and nothing is working, and everything is falling apart. And what about our kids? And what about this? And I felt this prompting to talk to our pastor's wife. So, we go talk to pastors and whatever, and that's amazing. Our pastors have amazing wisdom, but men and women just handle things differently. So, the advice I was getting from our pastors was this, but I really needed a woman's perspective. And we just happened to have several pastors' wives, and the one that was there is one who is just dear to my heart. And she suggested I try it God's way. So all the ways I had been trying to do marriage really were the culture's ways. Do you know what I mean? Like equality and women's rights, and we're going to do it this way, and grow up, would you, and all of these things, like push, 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 kind of that way. Or on the reverse side, like be quiet about everything, sweep everything under the mat. You're going to, not rock the boat, creating this kind of codependent doormat in my life. So we tried both extremes and taken lots of advice from counselors, and nothing was fixing our marriage. And do it God's way was like, well, I mean, of course, God's way is the way everyone does it. That was my thought at the time. And we went through this process of saying, okay, well, does the Bible talk about marriage? We have this amazing resource here, does it? And you know what? It does. But it didn't start how I thought. So I was so sure God was going to change him and fix him. That was my prayer. God, fix my husband. He is a mess, and he is the problem, and it is all this stuff. And God didn't start there. Not that God won't start there in someone else's marriage, but he had told me to do it his way. He had told me to wait, to try. And so obviously he had plans to fix some things in me. And so it began. And I want to start here in Matthew chapter 6. He says, so I say to you, do you worry about your life, what you'll eat or what you'll drink, or about your body, what you'll put on, right? We have all these worries. And I do, I'm a control freak. I'm a nag. I'm out of the closet nag to my husband. I try to manipulate things and get things to go my way because I'm worried about what if, and if this, and then that, and all of these most of them not even based in reality. Do you know what I mean? Like the worst case possible. Like it could do this and then she's going to be here and it's going to be the end of the world. And I can get from no trouble to the end of the world in 10 seconds. My mind does that kind of worrying thing. But God tells us not to worry, right? And he tells us how to make that happen. He goes on. So in verse 33, he says, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And then, I love this promise, and then all these things will be added to you. So to fix my marriage, he wanted me to seek him first. And that is kind of a turning point for us, and really in my walk with God even. Instead of seeking God to change my husband or seeking my husband for satisfaction in these areas or security in these areas or for whatever, I began to seek God first and his kingdom. And from that, probably a year of torture, it was so torturous to kind of reprogram my brain. Like, this is what the culture says is going to fix marriage and make marriage successful, but it is not what God says. It's just not. Most of what the culture tells us about marriage, about life in general, is so counter-biblical, if that's it. You know, we talk about being countercultural, but the culture is counter-biblical. Like, God says to do this, and the culture says to do that. And it's so easy to get swept up in doing things the culture's way, because the culture is in our face all the time, right? We're on YouTube and hear all these commercials and we're watching the show and it's funny and it's entertaining, but it's showing us marriage from a kind of a warped, twisted way, family life that is not any way I want my family. You know what I mean? Like, it's just crazy the way the culture has us thinking about and doing life, and it's not God's way. So in seeking God first, these are the 9 things that he taught me, like from the ground floor up. I feel like he wrecked my life and tore everything out. Not that they don't try to sneak back in, because y'all, they do. But 9 areas. And after kind of learning them, he was very clear to me that he didn't just teach me. I love to teach, and he gave me that heart and desire to teach others. And so it became what I use when I'm mentoring other wives and helping other wives who are just in either a tough season or a difficult marriage, or they are the only one standing for their marriage. That is often when they come to me. And I tell you what, I wish that you all would come to me sooner, that you all would come to God sooner, first of all. Like, by the time it's broken so far that we're looking for help, like intentionally looking for help, it's so much harder. If we would just be intentional to do and work on these 9 things all the time, we wouldn't get to the point of broken and on the road to divorce. Like, that's my heart. So y'all just bear with me. So the 9 areas that he kind of wrecked in me are, like, we started with love. And what does God say about love? And it is so different than what the culture says. It just is. It's not what we believe. He taught me very specifically that love is not an emotion in marriage. It's not, and it never was in ancient cultures. It was always a choice of their will. It was a deep-seated commitment. Love. They chose love. They chose to love sacrificially. They chose to put the other one's preferences and desires above their own. And that is the love that God calls us to, right? We know that, and we believe that, I feel like, for other believers, like in the church. Okay, I'm supposed to love and put them first, and, you know, the first will be last, and all of these things. But then when it comes to marriage, we kind of like chuck that out the window. Or I did, and I was like, but you need to love me, and I'm not having my needs met, and this is what I would prefer, and like putting it all there. And it just doesn't work if we're both doing that, does it? Like, we're just like, and it's so frustrating. But if we will learn to love God's way and make that a habit, and so with the course that I pulled together to help wives. So what I found a lot of times is that wives don't want to talk about the real things in their marriage. unless they are like at the end of the road and that's all the choice they had. So I pulled all of these things together and put them in a course online. So it's self-paced. You can do it in your home. Nobody has to know there's a problem with your marriage. You don't have to talk about the real things in your marriage if you don't want to. But if you do, like we're here, there's a supportive community for wives that we've pulled together, and y'all rock my world. Y'all are so amazing and so encouraging with biblical help. So in the course on your own, you can kind of let God teach you. And it starts with 1 Corinthians, of course, right? The love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, actually 12, where I kind of go back a little bit and talk to you about that God told us to love everyone this same kind of way, this choosing to love and to set others' preferences there, right? And he tells us how to love, right? This intentional way to love. And it says love is patient and love is kind and love is not jealous. Love does not brag. It's not arrogant. It does not act unbecomingly. It doesn't seek its own. It's not easily provoked. It doesn't take into account suffering of wrong, like that list. Do you have that book in your mind of all the things that your husband has done in the past? And so when he does it again, because he will, right? He's human. Then you're like, oh, you always do this. And I can tell you in 2005, you did it. And in 2011, January 5th, you did it. And here's this book. Like, we keep that record of wrong. But love doesn't do that, right? Love doesn't rejoice in unrighteousness. It rejoices in the truth. Love bears all things. It believes all things. Love hopes all things. Love endures all things. And that kind of love does not fail. And I would rephrase it to say that kind of love that is loved God's way, will lead to a successful marriage, a marriage that endures the test of time. You know what I mean? Like, we have marriages that last 10 years, 20 years, close to 25 years. We have this crazy mass exodus of marriage where everyone is getting divorced, but the marriages that last 40 years and 50 years and 60 years and they die within months of each other. I mean, those kind of marriages, they have learned to love this way. And so God taught me what that means and how to work through that. And so that is the first key to a successful marriage, is relearning love God's way, like just chucking that old way, the culture's way that is so wrong, and loving God's way. Then he began to talk to me about forgiveness. And forgiveness has been this battle between God and I for years and years and years, not because of my marriage, but because of my childhood. And it's so hard to forgive abuse and neglect and betrayal. It is so hard to let that go, because it feels like in letting it go, because that's how I thought about forgiveness, just letting it go, that those people who had hurt me so intently, they're getting away with it, right? If I wasn't holding on to that thing, then they get away scot-free, no punishment, no anything, and their life seems to be just going on fine, and I'm over here just in agony, struggling with daily life because of all of those things. And so God and I have been battling with forgiveness for some years. But then when you put it in the context of marriage, I was like, you have lost your mind that you want me to forgive him, and you want me to forgive him the way you forgive me. So forgiveness is the second key. And through this study, we talk about how to really forgive. This pathway, there is a pathway we can travel where we can let go of the offense and not let go of it into fairyland where it's never dealt with again, but we can give it to God, right? The Bible tells us that God is the Ancient of Days, right? He sits enthroned over all eternity, watching over everything that happens, and he keeps an account of everyone's actions and thoughts and heart, intentions. And there will come a day when we all will stand before the Ancient of Days and have to give an account for everything done in our life. And so I'm over here holding on to, my husband can't get his laundry into the laundry basket, what to say. Hypothetically, no, you all know my marriage a little too well, right? But God is up there, right? And he is also watching, and I can release that hurt to God, and God will be the judge over that. He tells us in Ephesians 29, he tells us to be angry and not sin. He tells us not to let the sun go down on our anger. He tells us not to take vengeance because vengeance is his. And he really taught me how to forgive. And there are 6 very practical steps that I don't have time to go into because I want to cover all 9 of these. So I'm so sorry for it. I do, however, give this section of the study away for free. So if you go onto my site, so it's HopeJoyInChrist.com/forgiveness challenge, all one word put together. And you can get all 6 lessons of how to forgive the hard things. And I apply it specifically to marriage because that's where God really opened my eyes to it, but it applies to everything we need to forgive in our lives. And teaching us through that to forgive and to release the bitterness and the resentment that kind of build up when we hold on to our right to be angry about that thing. It teaches how to choose to forgive. I'm going to choose to forgive every day. I'm going to actually think about forgiveness as a way of life, pre-forgiveness. It's something that came from, I'm going to say the wrong name, I'm sorry, but I think it's Rick Thomas, is a lesson I learned from him through his site about an attitude of forgiveness that says, it doesn't matter what wrong you do to me, I will forgive you. That doesn't mean there aren't going to be some consequences to that wrong, and we're not going to deal with the thing and talk it out later. And it doesn't mean that there aren't going to have to be some firm boundaries set for protecting me against some difficult things and some destructive behaviors, but I am going to choose to forgive because God said to forgive, because God has forgiven me of so much, and because forgiveness leads to freedom for me. And so through the study, we talk about that. If that is something you're like, you know what, I'm not interested in marriage so much, but there are some things I'm having a hard time forgiving, check that out. I'll put a link to it in the comments when the video is done too. So grab that. It's yours. It's something I don't feel like is specific to marriage and is anything that I want you to pay me to learn. Like, I want everyone to know how to forgive and really be able to forgive, not just, okay, God, I forgive it, but then I see that person again and immediately I'm back to that hurt place. So I didn't really forgive it. And so I need to forgive it again. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about a Christian, like, kumbaya feeling of, oh, I forgave and this is, how it's going to be. I'm talking about, how do you really genuinely forgive that offense? So you're walking in freedom from it. So when you, end up at the grocery store at the same time as this person who's hurt you, and you see them, you don't immediately feel like you need to run away or hide or become confrontational or want to plan out ways to hurt them. Do you know what I mean? Like, you will have really forgiven the thing. Okay, so that's there. The next piece, okay, so the third key to success, a way to make your marriage strong to last a lifetime, is understanding the difference between our preferences and our desires. And so this really comes from Galatians 5:13. It said, "For you were called to freedom, brethren. Only don't turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another." God really kind of, I don't know, can I just say like a million times, he just wrecked me to teach me this, that there are things I prefer, and there are things that I desire, and they can be very different. So I prefer that my garden grows very nicely, that, you know what I mean? Like I love to garden. I have this amazing strawberry patch on the side of our house, and I prefer to eat fresh strawberries in the spring. I prefer that it be handled a certain way. Like I want it to be watered on mist setting. I want the weeds to be pulled regularly. This is something that I care very deeply about. I have a specific plan, a way that I do it. But you know what? When I'm sick and I can't do it, and my husband can be so sweet sometimes to go out and take care of it. But you know what? He does not do it my way. He does not water those things on the mist setting. He does not pull the weeds until they are taller than the strawberries themselves. And so I also desire, right? So as much as I desire to have fresh strawberries every spring, I also desire to have a husband who loves to help, to have a husband who feels confident in showing me love this way. I prefer to have a husband who is sure of himself and confident and secure in our relationship. Right? And so our preferences and our desires can be at war with each other, okay? Because when I go out and see that he has used like the jet setting on the strawberries and knocked all the blossoms off of them, and I'm only going to get half of a crop, and the weeds are overgrown because he didn't have time to get to or whatever, my preferences can take the driver's seat of my mouth, and I can begin to lay into him. Don't you know you should have used the mist setting? Didn't I tell you that? This is important to me. Don't you care about that? What, you know what I mean? So my mouth, y'all, and no joke, my mouth can ruin our marriage. It can really get in the way of a lot of things. And in letting my preferences drive, I am destroying the thing that I desire, because my husband will hesitate the next time he thinks he wants to be kind and go help me with the strawberry patch. And my preference says, well, that's fine because he didn't do it my way anyway, and I'll find time and I'll make a way to do. But here's the thing, we can't do all the things. We can't be everything to everyone. And you know what? There are some things where there is an absolute one way, the right way, the only way to do things. But most of the things in life, there are lots of ways to do it, and his way of doing it may not be the way I prefer. But if my desire is to build up my husband and to strengthen our marriage, then instead of beating him down with words, I will say, man, I really appreciate that you came out here and did that. I was feeling so sick, I couldn't get to it. Really tells me how much you were thinking of me and how much you did care about me, and you did see that I care about this thing. And I will build him up. So I will let my desires, my deeper desires, be what drives my mouth to strengthen our marriage. And you know what, later on, when I have chilled out, I can say, hey babe, you know what, the next time you do it, could you think about using the mist setting? Because when you use the jet setting, it really hurts the strawberries. Say it and let it go, right? He may or may not remember that next time, and we may or may not have that conversation again in a calm way, in a good place later. But we need to be building up the things that we desire and setting our preferences to the side sometimes. And so this is the next lesson really that has been intense. So I'm going to jump through these a little faster. I'm sorry. So my mouth, and I call it my mouth. You know, I could have called it communication, but it's not about communication yet, right? This fourth part is really about getting control of my mouth. In James, it talks about how the mouth, you know, is just this force to be reckoned with, right? Like our tongue, it has the ability just to set fire and to destroy an entire forest. And in this case, to destroy my whole marriage, my whole life. And God really worked with me about understanding that the things that come out of my mouth start in my mind. And so it's important to get control of my thoughts and to run them through the Philippians 4-8 test. And so if you've been around for a while, we talk about this. What kind of things you think about dictate the kind of things you're going to say. All right. So if we're being intentional with our marriage, this fourth key is going to be to get control of your thoughts. In the book of Corinthians, he tells us that we have powerful weapons for spiritual warfare. And one of the jobs of those weapons is to take every single thought captive and hold it to obedience to Christ. So what does that thought need to obey? It needs to obey Philippians 4:8, where it says, finally, brethren, whatever's true, whatever's honorable, whatever's right, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. So we're going to run that thought through a test and say, do you know what my thought? Let's stick with the strawberries because we are in that season. And so that is my mind. It's on my mind. So you know what? He butchered the strawberry patch. Oh my goodness, I want to scream. I want to tell him off about all the things, right? But is that thought true, right? Because the first thought that comes to my mind is he never listens. He doesn't care about those things. He's just going to do whatever. But you know what? He did it without being prompted. So obviously that's not true. He does care. And he did listen and heard at least that I care about the strawberries, right? So it's not true. So I need to take that thought captive, check it out. Is it honorable? Is it just? Is it pure? Is it lovely? Is it of good repute? Is it excellent? Is it praiseworthy? Is it virtuous? If it is, great, think about it. If it's not, then we kind of have to build this, castle, like a fortress in our mind. Do you imagine? Imagine with me. Would you I imagine in my mind there's this castle full of thoughts, and in it are all the rooms for the kind of thoughts that are fine, right? You know what I mean? I'm thinking about my shows that I like to watch. Right now we're thinking about street foods. We're thinking about the Marie Kondo. Sorry, I'm in that decluttering place. We're thinking about school curriculum. I'm thinking about some things with my youngest, some behavioral things and some special needs things. I have all of these rooms within this castle of my mind, but I also have this quick chute old-timey houses used to have for their laundry. Do you know, in any room, you can toss the laundry down the chute and it goes down into where you're going to wash the laundry. Only in my castle, that is a dungeon with a guard, 8 burly-looking, fierce men who are going to just torture that thought and kick it out of my brain forever. Okay, so we're going to take that thought and put it to the test, and if it doesn't line up with what God says are good thoughts, then we're going to kick it out, because if I don't, it's going to come out of my mouth and it is going to ruin any chance for success in my marriage. And we don't want that. So within this particular week, we learn lots of strategies for getting a hold of the things that ruin our mouth. And then our fifth key for a successful marriage is going to be to replace those things, right? So we're going to get control of all the things, kick out the bad things, and then we have a lot of empty rooms probably, if you're like me, because there were a lot of things I shouldn't have been thinking about. And so what do we replace them with? We replace them with words of affirmation, appreciating our husband, thinking of the things that are good. There are always going to be negative things that we can think about. There just are. It doesn't matter if you have the perfect husband and the greatest marriage and you're in an amazing season right now. Kudos. I want to go sit down and have coffee with you because that is wonderful. But there are always going to be negative things you can think of, right? He doesn't put the toilet seat lid down. He prefers the roll to be turned this way. He puts the things in the dishwasher this certain way, or he puts the wrong things in the dishwasher, or he washes clothes mixed all together. There are always things, and if we focus on those things, that's when it's going to come out of our mouth, even if there are amazing things to appreciate and admire in our husband. So we're going to replace those negative things. We're going to check them, right? Send them down to that guard that's on duty and let him just torture the fire out of them and get them out of our castle, right? And replace them with good things. So appreciation and admiration. And I don't have my scripture open. Shoot, I'm sorry. So we're still in Philippians 4. Philippians. Let's see. So we have Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians 4. So we're in 4. We read Philippians 8, which was on my paper, and why I didn't bring 6 through, I don't know. So in Philippians 4, verse 6, he says, don't be anxious for anything, but in everything, right? With prayer and supplication and thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. So part of replacing those thoughts is lots and lots of prayer. Then we're going to go to verse 19, and my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus. So part of the wanting to think about the rough things is because, and say the rough things, right? All the negative things, is because we're afraid if we don't voice those things, those critical things, our needs are not going to be taken care of. But who is supposed to meet our needs? Is it our husband? Is he supposed to meet every single need we have? Is he supposed to do everything right all the time? He's not. It says, right, my God shall supply all your needs. And in the process of that, he tells us to appreciate and encourage and let our words edify and glorify. I don't have that verse here yet. I'm so ill prepared for this quick impromptu video. Quick, we're already 30 minutes in. Don't mind me. But he tells us what our words should be, and that our words should edify the hearer, that they should encourage and strengthen the hearer. And so that's where appreciation and affirmation comes in. And when we learn to appreciate our husband, and it starts in our thoughts still, it's still all about thinking about things that our husband does well or that we admire in our husband. And so we spend a whole week talking about how to dig up those things, because sometimes it's hard to think about. We have spent so much time thinking about all the things he does wrong that it's hard to replace them with all the things he does right, right? I could be very upset. My husband tends to hop from job to job, and so our finances are difficult sometimes. But you know what? He has grown and learned so much over the last few years, and he is learning to stay with a job until he finds the next job. And all of it is in this pursuit of finding the thing that God's called him to do. And so if I can change the direction of my thoughts, right, from being inconvenienced and frustrated with the inconsistency here to being proud of a godly man who's trying to find what God's called him to do, to be proud of a man who is at least working and paying attention to how much the job pays so that our needs are provided for, that I can admire a man who is praying and asking God to help us in our finances. That is a switch in what I'm thinking, which means it's going to be a switch in what I say. So these 2 weeks right here in the middle, 4 and 5, really focus on our thoughts. But they are because we need to focus on what we say, saying things differently. But we can't just have this formula. Okay, we can't just, I can't live long-term in a formula to say, okay, I'm going to have a 30-day challenge for saying words that are affirming. Okay, you know what? That can be an amazing tool. But if I haven't first fixed what I'm thinking about, after those 30 days are over, I'm going to be like, first of all, I'm not going to make it the 30 days. I'm going to be like 2 or 3 days in and like, why am I affirming him in this? He just did that, and that's crazy, and I need to tell him about that, or that's not going to change, and he's not going to meet this need and take care of this place. We have to fix what we're thinking about. It's so critical, right? We have to change what we're thinking about. Okay, so moving right along, so we are to the 6th thing, and that is where God really began to show me about who he ordained to lead our home. And this week really stepped on my toes. It was much longer than a week for me. So I know it steps on your toes. I get emails from you right in the heart of it about how intense it is to think about. My husband is supposed to be the leader. When God looks at our family, no matter who is actually leading or who is qualified to lead or who wants to lead or who, you know what I mean, like all of those things, God sees my husband as the head of our home, and he holds him responsible for everything that happens in our home. God is not a 21st century God, he does not ever change. And so as much as we have changed and said equal rights and equality and 50-50 and a woman can do anything a man can do, when God looks at the family, he still sees the husband as the head. And we see that in 1 Corinthians 11:3, where he said, I want you to understand. I love that. Sorry. I love that. Like, he is right there up front saying, you don't understand. So 2,000 years ago or so, they didn't get it then. So it makes me feel much better that I don't get it now and that it's hard now, because it was hard then, or he wouldn't have started it that way. Like, would you please listen to me? Listen and understand this. Can you just imagine God up there talking to us that way? That is how I picture him, like very animated and human and just kind of in that way. And so don't mind me. So he says, I want you to understand that Christ is the head of every man, right? Okay, so we have this piece where Christ is the head and the man is the head of the woman, right? So we have Christ, then we have the husband, then we have the wife, and God is the head of Christ. So we have this sandwiched all together. When God looks at our family, right, first of all, if we are both believers, if this family is following after the righteousness of God, seeking first the kingdom of God, how he started, when God looks at us, he sees Christ. He just does, right? We see that when he sees us, he sees the blood of the Lamb covering. He doesn't see our mess that way. Obviously, he's God. He knows what he's seeing, but he sees that God, that Christ has covered us, that payment for our mess, for our sin, has been bought with his price. And so God sees Christ and he's holding us together. This, I think of it like a sandwich, right? So you have like Christ is the head, right? And our husband should, I hate that word, but I'm going to use it for a second. He should be pursuing God with everything he is. And then we can trust our husband. We can trust the heart of our husband to lead wisely, to wash us with the water of the word, and to cherish us and to take care of us, okay? And he is looking to Christ, and then God is holding us all together. The problem comes in, right, when we have a husband who is not, okay? Maybe he's not even saved. Maybe he is, but he is so immature in his faith or backslidden, or he has this particular sin, and so you know there's a problem. You know that he's not having a quiet time with God. He's not pursuing God the way the Bible says that the husband is supposed to be. And so it's easy to feel like that means we can just switch roles, right? So as the wife, I'm pursuing God and I'm doing all these things. And so I'll just lead our family because I can do that with wisdom and I'm following God. But you know what? God, he doesn't give any slack there. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say, wives, follow the leadership and respect your husband if he is the perfect man doing all the godly things and leading your home in godly wisdom. He doesn't. He just says, wives, submit to your husband. Wives, respect your husband. That is expected because even though the husband is the head of the wife, Christ is also the head of the wife. And can I ask you just a question? I want you to think about this because we get stuck here. This is where people step out of meeting with me for a time, step out of a class because they say, my husband's never going to lead. My husband is lost. I don't know if he says he's saved. He goes to church sometimes. I don't know if he's saved. I've never seen him open a Bible. My husband won't pray with me. My husband is, this kind of immature. He's, whatever. And so we feel like that gives us the right as wives to begin to lead and to take the lead. And maybe it's for you that your husband just never did lead and he doesn't have that particular desire at all. He would rather, play video games all day, or he would rather, look at the stock market or read whatever. It doesn't change how God sees our family. It doesn't. God is the same, and he expects our family to be operating a particular way. But you know what? He is all-knowing, all-powerful God. Has God ever failed you? And I want you to think about that because there have been times in my life where I would have said, yeah, God's failed me. I've fallen flat on my face. God has allowed divorce and bankruptcy and miscarriage and abuse and betrayal and crazy hard things into my life. God has failed me. Has he? So as I look back over all of those times where I justified walking away from God because I was sure he had failed me, I was not really pursuing him with all my heart. I was giving him a whole lot of lip service. I was going to church. I opened my Bible occasionally. But I was not surrendered to him doing the things that put me directly in his protection. Also, a lot of those things were not my choice. They were the choice of other sinful human beings. And we live in a warped and fallen and sinful world where bad things happen to good people all the time. I debate saying it that way, right? Because I don't know that there really are good people. I think we all kind of mess up a lot. We're not good by God's standards, okay? And so I have to challenge that in myself. What would happen if I said, okay, God, you said my husband is supposed to lead, which means I am not supposed to lead. And I am not doing this your way, which means I am stopping your blessing in our marriage. But I am terrified to step back from leading because if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. If I don't do it, we're going to have all kinds of problems. He's never, and he can't, and he doesn't want to, and he's going to do it different. And can I say that piece, that controlling piece, I don't know how many other controlling wives are around, but I'm a controlling wife. And that piece of he's going to do it different and it's not my way and it's not my preference, right? That piece we talked about earlier on about my preference and my desire butting head, right? My desire is to do marriage God's way. But my preference is to have every single thing in my life done the way that I prefer it. And so when those things butt heads, one of them is going to lose. So either I'm going to control everything and do it my way because it's how I want it, or I'm going to surrender my need to control it and have it done my way and let the thing be God's way. So in this week, we talk about how to do that, how to begin to step back out of the things you're leading that your husband should be leading. And how to understand what that could look like. That doesn't mean that my husband does everything and I'm just a yes woman, because we have different gifts and talents and abilities and desires. And so I am a helpmeet to my husband. And as we work through what is his and what is mine, can he still lead our family if I am taking care of the children and making all the decisions about that? Absolutely he can, because we are talking about that. We're having open communication about that. I'm beginning to understand what his desire for our children are, and we are not butting heads about those desires. Where we have a difference in desire and preference for how our family is run, we talk about it, we work those things out, instead of me leading and doing it my way and hoping he'll kind of trail along behind, which is how we did it for a lot of years. And we talk about that at length. And I have to tell you, it's one of the hardest weeks for most of us, because we live in a culture where men don't lead. And so that is the norm. In most marriages, the woman is leading. And it's not the way God called us to do life, to do marriage. Okay, so 3 more things. We're going to hit them really fast because I realize we're getting close to an hour. The 7th thing is understanding men. So understanding why he prefers to do it different. Understanding what it is that he needs from me as a woman, and how to do that. How to switch my mindset to say he is not being mean and thoughtless and unkind to me. He just thinks about this very differently. And so I need to begin to speak his language. And in turn, right, as I'm learning to learn his language of respect, he then stops feeling disrespected and wants to learn my language of love and security. And it is an amazing piece. So in Psalm 139 is where we come from. And it says to God, you formed me in my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. And I'll give thanks to you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Which means he very intentionally made my husband the way he is. He very intentionally made me the way I am. And then as we come together and become one flesh, We learn how to live with each other in an understanding way. The Bible tells men to live with women in an understanding way. But I've never known the Bible to be sexist. So I really believe he also wants women to learn to live with men in an understanding way. And we continue going on in that regard into the 8th piece, where we are talking the 8th, right? You can't see the other hand, the other 4, 8, where we're talking about respect. And what respect means to my husband is not the same as what it means to me. And we've already seen God tells us to respect. But it's so hard to respect my husband when I don't even understand what it is he finds disrespectful, why he finds it disrespectful. Honest to goodness, why it is so hard to ask directions for things, and why he finds it disrespectful when I want him to find directions for things. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, we look at this word and this concept completely different. The culture says respect has to be earned and maintained and kept. But God says wives are supposed to respect their husband, period. No loopholes, no excuses, no exit strategies. We respect him. And so we need to understand what that looks like. And when we do, amazing things will begin to happen in your marriage. That man who has put up a wall between you, okay? If yours is anything like mine, by the time we had hit the point where I was trying to figure out God's way, we were done. We were not talking. There was nothing going on in our world that was good or loving. And as I began to learn what it meant to respect him, I could see why he had shut me out, why he was emotionally distant from me. He had just put up this dam between us, right? Where all of his emotions were on this side, and I was on the other side trying to get in. But I had so disrespected him for so long, the way that he understood disrespect. I had not seen it that way. But it was very real. When I began to show him respect the way he understood respect, that dam came down. And he began to let me back into his thoughts and his dreams and his desires and his heart and his life. And our marriage began to turn a corner, which was just amazing. Then our last piece that we will look at within the 9-week study is all about our priorities, right? The Bible tells us what our priorities should be. He tells us to love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our mind, with all our soul, and to love others. And that requires a lot of intentionality, right? No matter what season we're in, it is so easy to let our priorities get just so off balance, where, I'm in a season of motherhood where my children require so much attention. It's demanding all the time that it's easy to have, this kind of balancing act in my kids. And man, they are taking so much of my time, and my husband is way down over here, and he wants that time, and we have to find a balance and find a way to do marriage God's way amidst the crazy chaos of life. So we talk about how to set our priorities, what they should be, and how to work through that so that these changes that we're making will last, okay? And I have to tell you, the reason I pulled it all together was so that I had something to work with, so that wives knew where we were going. They could work on it at their own pace at home. But I find that, for the most part, we will go to Google to ask for help for things well before we will go to the pastors at our church, to a counselor, even to a friend. And so I wanted there to be a resource online where women could go and find these ways to do marriage God's way, to intentionally invest in their marriage and make it stronger. And, for us, these were the things that fixed our broken marriage. It was broken. I needed God to save my marriage. And now, as we have passed that turning point, these are still the things that I go back to intentionally invest in and build our healthier marriage into a stronger and stronger marriage, so it will last a lifetime. So these are things that can help a wife in any season of her marriage. So it's there, it's all together. It is video driven. So I teach through each lesson, and there is a handbook. If you print them out, they are thick. If you do them online and work through them, it's definitely an option. I'm working on having it published so it's easier to get a hold of, but that is such a long process that I'm not quite to yet. It is on my site, $37 for the 9-week class with videos, a safe place to have comments and ask questions. But until Monday at midnight, it is also a part of the Ultimate Homemaking Bundle, which is only $29. So you can get that plus more than 100 other resources for less than the course price itself, which is such a value. I'm such a frugal girl. Like, I love getting things for less. That is, I don't know if I should proudly say that to the world, but that's how I am. So if this is something that you need, if this is something like you're in this place and you need to strengthen some areas in your marriage, check it out. You do it at home. You don't have to be in a group and share all the things, but you can share the things and get some feedback and some help. There's also a Facebook group. I'll be sharing this into the group, so if you're in it, you guys are amazing, where you can come and ask for prayer and ask questions and find encouragement there. I would say if it is what you are in need of, check it out. $37, less than $40. That's not a big thing. And if it is, reach out to me, because we do have it. Like, it's in the Ultimate Homemaking Bundle right now for $29 until Monday. There are other times where I put it on sale. So I don't want anyone to miss out on this resource, but I feel like it's worth the investment. So that is what I want to share with you today. And I just want to pray for you as we close our time, and just know that as you are part of this community, I do pray for you regularly. You can always email me or message me with prayer requests, and we can chat through things as well. So, Father God, I thank you so much that you love us so much that you do tell us how to take care of our relationship. God, this is one of the most important relationships in our lives, and you have said this is how you can do it, and you give us help, and you give us community to help, and you give us all the tools we need. God, forgive us for not coming to you before it gets to a bad place. Forgive us for trying to do it the culture's way. God, help us to learn to do marriage your way. God, I pray for every wife or husband or marriage that's represented watching this video, even now, that you would begin to just work healing and restoration, that you would strengthen them with your righteous right hand and help them and hold them up. God, and that you would show us your way, that you would just do exceedingly abundantly, Father, more than we could even ever ask for or imagine, for our families, for our marriages, for our lives, God. And we will give you all the praise and the glory in Jesus' precious and holy name. Amen. All right, guys, I will catch you later. And until next time, have a blessed day.